Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the ordinary meeting of the 23rd of March 2021. It's my privilege to declare the meeting open. We have a different format of meeting today because of weather events. We have, firstly, we have two councillors who are with us via dial-in today, Councillor West and Councillor McGuinness. Also, we have three of the general managers also with us remotely, I believe, and with us in the room is the GM of Council Sustainability, Mr. Oliver Pring, and of course the CEO. And I note a late apology, absence due to exceptional circumstances for Councillor Swamborough, who has just was going to dial in, but unfortunately was dealing with some water challenges at his property and is needing to pay attention to safety and well-being in that circumstance. And we wish him well with those endeavours. So that being declared and noted, and that leave being granted, and that apology being noted, turn to prayers this morning, and Pastor Nicholas Crampton. Nicholas, I believe you're with us through the challenges of multiple technologies, but it is good to have you join us for your first occasion for prayers with Council. I hand over to you, sir.
My name's Pastor Nicholas Crampton from Burner Baptist Church, and it is certainly an honour and privilege to be opening the council meeting in prayer this morning. I'd like to give my greetings to the Mayor and all the councillors, and wish you all well, and let you know that we are all praying for you outside of this prayer this morning. So if you'd just like to join with me as I open our meeting in prayer. Lord, I just thank you so much for who you are and what you have done for us. We thank you so much for our communities that we live in and the land that you have blessed us with. When we look across everything that you have given us, we realise how blessed we are as people to have abundant land, to have people that are so passionate and caring about our land, and have such a drive to see the best things happen for our community. We thank you for that. Lord, we thank you so much for the rain that's happening right now as we speak. We thank you for the blessing that is, as we have been in a desperate need for that provision, for the rain on such a dry and parched land. We thank you for that rain, and as it rains, we pray that you keep people safe and well, as people, some are beginning to be secluded from roads being cut off and different things. We pray, Lord, that you keep them safe, that you help us to be there for one another and to care for one another in this current time. In thinking about the rain, Lord, we take a moment to pray for those affected by the flood in New South Wales. Many have been devastated by what's happening, and we thank you that there has not been any loss of life so far. We pray, Lord, that you comfort the people in those situations. We pray that you protect them from danger, and that you help them to not only be safe in themselves, but to help one another and to care for one another. We pray that you help the government and all the different agencies to support and be there for people well, that you give them wisdom, and that you help them to work for the bettering of their community, and to help the needs of those who need it at this time. Lord, we just thank you as well for our community. We pray that you bless our community and all the different areas, that you help us to grow in, in, in prosperity, that you help us to grow as a people, that you help us to be a people who can be proud of where we live and who we are. Lord, for the meeting this morning, we pray that you help all the councillors to make wise decisions for our local area, that you can give them wisdom, you can help them to have good and beneficial conversations, that you'll be able to help us to have healthy disagreements while maintaining respect and care for one another. We pray, Lord, that our community as well will find harmony and unity in our common needs and struggles that we have, that we are all suffering and we're all struggling in, and that we can find harmony and unity together as we fight and work toward having a better community and having a community which can live in peace and harmony. And Lord, we thank you so much that you are our God and that you look over our land and that you are sovereign above all things. As we come towards the time of Easter, we begin to prepare our hearts and think of what you have done for us on the cross and in your resurrection. And we pray that as this time draws near, we can think of this and we can find hope in what you have done for us. We pray this in Jesus Christ's name. Amen.
Thank you, Pastor. It's a pleasure. I look forward to sharing with you again somewhere in the near future. You are welcome to continue to listen to our meeting today, but I also understand that your schedule will have its own challenges and opportunities at this time.
Well, not a problem at all, and I look forward to that in the future.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Councillors, I would just pause again because of a few of those disruptions. I would pause and pay respects to the traditional owners of our magnificent region, particularly their elders past, present and emerging. Thank them indeed for their ongoing nurture of their culture and also for their gracious and generous celebration of shared custody with us as we shape a bright future together. Come to item 5 of our agenda today. Are there any declarations of prescribed or declarable conflicts of interest pertaining to the meeting today? I believe there were none pre-notified, so I'll take that as a no. There are no announcements or mayoral minutes for the meeting today. There are no presentations of petitions or deputations. We come to item 8, the confirmation minutes of the previous meeting. Councillors, you've had those available to you. There's a recommendation before us for the minutes of the ordinary meeting of the 9th of March to be adopted. Seek a mover. Councillor McConnell, seconded. Councillor Chalk. To the two councillors online, you'll have to call out loudly and fast if you wish to be mover or seconder. You're at a slight disadvantage, so apologies for that. So we have a mover and a seconder. So are there any comments to that? Any questions to those minutes?
Just one, Mayor. I did go through and proof check to make sure what was put in the minutes against your mayoral minute was true and correct as best as I could. So as the mover of the motion, if there's any errors in that, happy to take some feedback from the public to improve my checking skills.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor McConnell. I tried hard to stay close, certainly, to the intent, if not perfect wording of that matter last meeting, but I too believe it's been accurately collected in those minutes. Any other speakers? If not, we'll put the motion to adopt. I'll actually call it by division so that I can confirm I've got everyone present at the meeting, so I'll have to do it that way. So Division 2. John Corbett.
Yes.
Division 3.
Yes.
Division 4.
Yes.
Division 5.
Yes.
Division 6.
Yes.
Just one. Got to practice the mute button. We all have this challenge.
Yeah.
So thank you, councillors. Then there's no business before the meeting today arising from the previous minutes. Therefore, we come to section 10 of our agenda. First item being item 10.1, the Burdesa Community Pub and Library, commencing on page 4 of your agenda. GM Customer Regional Prosperity. Deborah, are you with us?
Yes, I am. Good morning, Mayor, councillors and executive and everyone listening online. Today we're presenting the final piece of the puzzle for the Beaudesert Community Hub and Library for the project that was conducted with funding from the Queensland Government's Maturing Infrastructure Pipeline Program 2, very long name. That project funding has a quite stringent funding agreement, and in order for us to meet all the requirements of that funding agreement, today we're asking Council to submit approval to submit those detailed designs for the proposed Beaudesert Community Hub and Library, and in order for us to acquit the funding agreement and the funding for that Maturing Infrastructure Pipeline Program funding. I believe Deborah Moore is in the room with you, Mayor, and I'm unsure if Matt Creedy has joined us, but we're open to take any further questions regarding this particular project, the designs and the studies that have been conducted in relation to preparing it to this point.
Thank you for that introduction. Councillors, do we have any questions for clarification that you wish to raise? I'll go around by division just to make sure that no one has dropped out. Councillor McConnell.
No, not at this stage.
Councillor West, Division 3.
There was, thank you, Mayor, there was just one for the undercover parking, and I just wondered the access up to the library require a
You'll have to keep speaking close to your microphone so that we can hear you, please, Virginia.
So I heard the question
Yes.
there. It was whether or not the underground car parking has where's the access point up to the library. So there are two access points, councillor. So there's an ability for people to come to park in underneath the building and go. They'll go across to the current admin building, and there is an access point that would bring them out to where the current lift is in the administration building. And there is also a second access point in the back corner of the building, probably closer to where the CWA hall is now, that staff will be able to use for stock to come up and down, and not so that's used as a separate entrance for books and other things that arrive in. So it keeps the other access clear for patrons of the building.
Thank you, GM. And there was just one other question. I just wondered if you might please, given that we're quitting this grant, you just might reiterate on the total how much is coming.
Sorry, Councillor West, you keep fading out. I don't know whether you are close, keeping your handset very close if you could.
Sorry, did you hear that question, Deborah?
Could you just repeat it?
Yes,
The other councillors didn't, so could you just repeat the question?
Happy to repeat the question. I just wondered, given that we are acquitting this grant, I just wondered if you might reiterate the project, please. How much is coming from various different grants and how much council is putting towards the total project, please?
So this project that we're working on today is to acquit the MIP funding, So the total cost of this part of the project has been is 453,100, and the MIP contribution was 409,091. And council contribution was $44,009. So it's a 90% funded and 10% split to council for this MIP funded project.
Thank you.
Come to Councillor Knight, Division 4.
Thank you, Mayor. Question to the GM. The MIP2 funding, did it commence at the original time frame of 2016, or did this round of the funding only commence in the latter stages of that consultation?
No, the library review process commenced in 2016. That was undertaken by Peter Mowick from Peter Mowick Architecture. And then the MIP, in April of 2018, Council submitted a grant application for the MIP funding for that 409 and 91,000, and that was to undertake the cost-benefit analysis, the economic impact assessment, and the detailed designs for the project.
Councillor, you have more?
Yeah, thank you. So the original review with Peter Mowick fed into the MIP funding. I guess that provided a fair bit of the background to the direction that we have headed with the development of the concepts. Would that be correct?
Yes, it laid the foundation of by assessing all the current spaces. So the current library, it looked at it comparatively to the national standards and the ability for those spaces to be relevant and provide the services that the current community needs, and then for the community as it grows into the future. As a part of that review, it was flagged that based on that 2016 assessment, a new community hub and library would need to be 3 times the size of the current Beaudesert library building footprint, and into the future, to cater for the future up to 2031, it would need to be more than 4 times the size of the current footprint. And in order to achieve the proper assessments and to do all the analysis, that's when council sought the grant funding, because the government provides this funding to do all the research, so that projects such as this are in a pipeline and therefore can be funded in future, having had all this, the thorough research, the design and the cost benefit analysis basically in the pipeline, ready for any future funding opportunities that may emerge. And I believe councillors in fact looked at one of those future funding opportunities when they adopted submitting to the Building Better Regions Fund at the last meeting. So I guess this project has served us well by having a project such of this scale actually had the final, had such a thorough review in order to be ready.
Thank you.
Any further questions, Councillor? Division 5, Councillor Shaw.
Yeah, thank you. My question is, when you undertake a project like this, do the designers only consider what's necessary for the library, or do they consider the budget in designing it? So do they only work from how do I put this? Do they only consider what the vision is for the project, or do they also consider the budgetary restraints that they may have to design it?
Yes, I think I understand the question. Thank you, Councillor Chalk. My understanding, and Deborah Moore may wish to comment further on this, as she's been project managing this with Matt Creedy. The way in which this project has been built had started with that review. So what the scale and the size and what the future needs would be of a facility such as this, and libraries have evolved to much more than just a place to store books. So you'll understand from the designs and some of the previous discussions, this building is many and varied and multifaceted. And so through the consultation that has occurred through library users, looking at national standards, looking at what community hubs and libraries need to be to facilitate the service and customer service delivery to the community, and in this case for Bow Desert's community and surrounds. All of that is taken into consideration, and they start with that canvas, and then they build the design based on that need, based on the scale, based on the site, and finishes, and whether we want it as a sustainable building. So all of those components and then form the design, and then those designs are then costed by the consultants that have worked with us, and they have designed many spaces such as this. And during that process, there was also a very thorough review of other sites. And so councillors had previous discussions about other buildings, about retrofitting, about the current site. So there's been a very thorough review to land this design and all of its many uses that are contained within it. And then that is costed in order for us to understand the cost to build this facility of this size. I'm not sure, Mayor, whether Deborah Moore has anything more she wishes to add, having worked so closely with the company who has designed this.
She's indicating no, she thinks that's a good synopsis.
Thank you.
Councillor Chalk, did you have a further?
No, thank you for that. You understood my question, even if I didn't. And this design has incorporated all the work that needs to be undertaking for the build and the integration between the two buildings?
Yes, it has. So there were some identified economies of scale, and it's a shame Councillor Swanborough's not with us today, because I recall in early briefings where he specifically asked for some economies of scale around this building, in particular, looking at new ways of serviceability of our customers. And that extended from the customer service aspects, where people come to pay a rates bill or have other inquiries for planning and the like, versus someone coming to check out a book or to use a study room or to use one of the community rooms. So the way that got us thinking, and we started working as an executive and also with the designers, and you will have heard in previous discussions that we've found a way for a better integration into the administration building so that we can achieve some of those economies of scale, have ease of access for anyone wishing to do business with council, and that the ultimate goal would be, it would be a one-stop shop at the first counter that greets you, with staff being able to service your needs, whether it's pay a rates bill or whether it's have a planner come and meet, or whether it is check out a book. So that integration long term will have a return on this investment, both in what we can do in customer service, but what we can do in terms of utilisation of this building.
Councillor Chalk's finished. Could I, just before we move on to Councillor McGuinness, could I just perhaps a supplementary to that question from Councillor Chalk? I note in the report, and I just ask perhaps if you flag the reference to refurbishment costs. What does that relate to in the context of that prior answer for Councillor Chalk about the integration to the existing?
Yeah, so in terms of that question, the only cost that is in the cost benefit analysis that is associated with the integration of the new building to the existing administration building is $550,000, and therefore works at level 1 and level 2 and at the front entrance of the existing council administration building, and these, so that will channel everybody into that one easily accessible entrance into the new community hub and library. And for the previous question that Councillor West asked, for the works at level 1 and 2 is for that direct access to come into the building off the car park and be accessible for people to the lift and or to stairs going up to the level of accessing entry into the library. And these works are vital in allowing that new entrance to operate as it was intended, and for the after hours aspects of the building to function correctly. So they're the only costs associated with when you refer to refurbishment, and quite specifically because we're aware that in delivering on the MIP project, we were not able to factor into these detailed designs costs for any further works that may be associated with the administration building, because this project is about the community hub and the library. But naturally, there's a point of connection between the two buildings. And so I can confirm the project team has indicated those costs are $550,000 of the total costs.
Thank you. Councillor McGuinness, Division 6.
No, I'm right, Mayor, thanks.
Thank you very much. Thanks for those
Can I just come back in?
clarifications. Councillor McConnell?
Just another quick one to the GM. Consultation has been fairly extensive across many years for this. It started back in 2016, is that correct?
On this particular process, I mentioned earlier when responding to Councillor Enright, the Peter Mowick work, but also in 2016, consultation commenced on the Beaudesert Town Centre Master Plan, and this concept of a new community hub and library was part of those discussions. It went through to 2019, where we held consultation with community and business to talk about the development of the town centre project, of which this is a phase, and then we got very clear feedback from the community about wanting to see greening and shade trees and boulevards. They wanted to see community space. They wanted to see welcoming gateways, and they wanted to see walkable streets and linkages, and that fed into the assessment that's been undertaken about the placement of this building, and also the juxtaposition now to the administration building, which is going to free up the green space in the rest of the parkland that will be available in Davidson Park for all those other community interactions. And then there's been focus groups where we've had business and communities members by invitation, and also the team ran a very thorough library users consultation, both with library users and with library staff, and also did some reconnaissance to other surrounding libraries and new libraries that have been developed across the region in order to inform the designs of this. So there has been multiple layers of consultation associated either with the Vibrant Active Towns and Villages project, as in the Beaudesert Town Centre piece, or specifically around the development of this library, community hub and library, I should say.
Thank you.
And sorry, can I just add to that, Councillor, coming up now is in, planned community engagement from this point forward, because we're about to open a pop-up shop on Brisbane Street directly opposite the Council's administration building. There'll be a opportunity for further consultation for people to come through and discuss the designs of the community hub and library. We plan to open that in April April of this year, and that will facilitate a pop-up opportunity for people to drop in and discuss the Beaudesert Town Centre master plan, all of the phases and projects that are planned within that. And we'll also be producing 4,500 pocket guides that will be distributed to residents, Beaudesert residents via letterbox drop, council venues, local businesses, and through the pop-up shop. So there's further consultation to come, and all of this, I guess, rolls up into what is the Beaudesert Town Centre revitalisation vision that Council has set for Beaudesert.
Thank you. How long do we anticipate the pop-up shop being open for?
It will operate, it will be, the Bowie Hub will be known as it'll be known, and it'll be operating 3 days a week, Tuesday, Wednesdays and Thursdays from 10 till 2. I'm unsure of the total length of time, unless my colleague Chris can answer the time frame of it staying open. Chris, for the duration of the project?
Not at this stage. I think we're keeping it fairly open-ended because we'll just see how much the community accesses it, and we'll just play it somewhat by ear at this particular point in time.
Thank you.
Councillor Enright.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a question to Deborah, if I may. I'll start with a bit of a statement, but a lot of... no, I won't start with a statement. I'll start with a question.
Thank you.
Has future population growth been considered in the design of this project?
Yes, councillor, and you will note that there's an attachment 6 to the report, which is there's a full analysis that has been conducted looking at the current population, the future growth predictions, and as I mentioned earlier, that started back in 2016, but that analysis is attached to the report is the analysis that associates at this point in time to this project, so that there's been some review of that and looking at what the growth levels will be. And as I mentioned earlier, that doing those predictions and looking at future needs and the future way in which people will use the library has all been taken into consideration as presented in that report.
Just on the budget implications. Yeah, I know. Got much.
Sorry, I didn't hear that.
Yeah, sorry, I'm mumbling like Councillor Chalk.
Tongue tie impacts.
Sorry.
I'm just looking at the budget. We've got in there that we're seeking outside funding, and it's probably to our GM sustainability. When we look at funding for projects like this, why do we borrow money instead of using current funds to fund a long-term project like this?
I'm happy to take that question, Deborah. I guess, councillors, as part of the deliberations with budget, we've got an obligation to maintain certain levels of cash, and certainly whilst the financial report today masks the volumes of cash that we have, and that's obviously there's a number of reasons for it, but our core funds or our retained earnings basically amount to 3 to 4 times what we need to have a cash flow balance. Once we start utilising or going below those levels, there's a risk to council in terms of being financially sustainable. Now that certainly, we've got cash there, but we've just got to be mindful that to operate as a council, we've got ongoing concerns that if we start digging too much into those retained earnings, then we run the risk of running out of cash.
So do we borrow money for long-term projects like this so that those who use it in the future are also paying, and so that those in the current are paying over 20 years, but that people coming in will benefit? Is that correct?
That's correct, Councillor McConnell, as well as a number of other reasons. The opportunity costs, obviously, further delaying projects could have a detrimental effect of costs of those projects being delivered increasing exponentially when the project's been identified that there is a requirement for it. But certainly those other reasons you've indicated are taking into account when considering these.
Thank you.
Councillors, if we're satisfied with clarifications, there are no other comments to add at this time. I might move forward and ask the GM to introduce the recommendation, and I'll seek a mover.
Thank you, Mayor. The recommendation is that Council submit the detailed designs for the proposed voters at Community Hub and Library, developed following community consultation, in order to acquit the Queensland Government's maturing the Infrastructure Pipeline Program 2 project funding agreement.
Seek a mover, Councillor Enright. Any further questions or additional information, councillors?
I'm just confirming we are not on this one approving any funding for the actual building. All we're doing is endorsing or approving the design application. Is that correct?
Yes, I'll provide that clarification. Yes, councillor. The recommendation before us today deals with the acquittal of the MIP funding, which was provided for this design phase. And as part of that acquittal process, we're required to submit the product, which is the plans and the package that's before us today. This does not commit us to a time frame. It commits us to the closeout of that program. And just further to that, as councillors will recall, we a few weeks ago have submitted an application to a grant program to seek partial funding towards the ability to deliver this program. And that's one step in the process of being able to move to the next phase. But today is purely around the submitting of the plans to close out the MIP funding that was provided. Any other points, or any other additional information requests? Councillor West or Councillor Minns?
Fine, thanks.
No, I'm right.
Thank you. The other councillor in the room happy. Then I seek a seconder. Councillor Chalk. Too quick for you, I think. Councillor West just beat you.
That's all right.
Now, I'm wishing to speak to the motion, Councillor Enrock.
Thank you, Mayor. I think this shows the way that our council has operated over many years in looking at avenues to offset the cost for our projects, but also in the design of our projects. And this MIP funding has provided significant 90% of the costs for the design, which is a very important part of the process. $409,091 is a huge contribution to the critical design process of this critical project. And I would commend the staff on the process that they have followed to enable this to happen.
Anyone wishing to speak against the motion? Anyone seeking leave to speak additionally?
I'd like to, Mayor, if I may, please.
Councillor West.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, I just want to say what a positive step on the pathway towards this the new Bodesa Community Hub and Library this is. An immense amount of work has gone into this process, and as has already been mentioned, it's had a very thorough review and it's been spoken about since 2016. So this is very momentous day on the pathway that we are on towards new facilities in our growing town of Bodesa. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Anyone else seeking leave to speak to the motion? Otherwise, I will speak additionally. I'm really glad that we're at the stage of acquitting this and having such a high quality set of plans in place. The levels of consultation and analysis to get to the stage of this, starting from 2016 with understanding the gap, was really important. This represents a significant strategic milestone, and it shows that we're looking to the long-term horizon, not just the short-term, in the way we're thinking as a council, and getting a facility that will still be relevant in 20 plus years, and affording value to what will be the major corridor of growth in our region, and services a large range of communities, as well as supporting all of our satellite libraries. Really important to get this facility well thought through and developed to this level, and I'm really grateful for the access to the MIP funding to take the pressure off of ratepayers for that, and look forward to in future times hopefully getting some other funding that takes the pressure off ratepayers for the delivery as well, so that we can continue to accelerate the proper strategic agenda for the region. Wish to close, Councillor Enrock.
Thank you, Mayor. I endorse those comments, and I think the important part here is that we are building, or we are working on the process through the steps to build community infrastructure that will provide a great resource for our growing community.
Thank you. Councillors, I put the motion as tabled to the vote. Division 2?
Yes.
Division 3?
Yes.
Division 4?
Yes.
Division 5?
Yes.
Division 6?
Yes.
And Mayor, yes as well. So that That's carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. We move to item 10.2. You continue, GM.
Thank you, Mayor.
Page 65, councillors.
Thank you, Mayor and Councillors. 10.2 is a planning appeal 55/21 for the Childcare Centre at Brooklands Drive in Beaudesert. I'm aware that I have the Manager of Planning online, Mark Lohman, and I believe Mark is going to walk Council through this report. So I'll hand over to Mark.
Thank you, Deborah. Good morning, Council. Council will recall that in December we approved an application for a childcare centre, 100 child centre at Brooklands Drive. As the application was impact assessable, it went out for public consultation and the application received 4 properly made submissions. Those submitters have taken up their legal right to further appeal this application and have submitted an appeal against the decision of council. The appeal is based on some higher order planning grounds as well as traffic and parking. The process with the appeal is firstly council needs to file an entry of appearance to indicate that it will defend the application, and secondly then we go into a mediation process which will hopefully either resolve the issue or at least clarify the issues in dispute, and should that fail we then go to a hearing. So this report seeks to formalise the process for council to acknowledge the entry of appearance and to appoint myself to provide guidance and instruction to our legal team throughout the course of the appeal.
Thank you. Councillors, any questions to this item, starting with Councillor McConnell? Any clarifications?
No, Mayor.
Councillor West?
No clarification, no request for clarification. Thank you.
Councillor Enright?
No, thanks, Mayor. I think it's all very clear.
Councillor Chalk?
No, I'm fine, thanks.
Councillor McGuinness?
All that goes on.
Thank you. Then we'll move forward to the recommendation, GM.
Thank you, Mayor. The recommendation is that Council acknowledge the filing of an entry of appearance to commence a defence of the appeal, and 2, pursuant to Section 240 of the Local Government Act 2009, Council authorise the Manager Planning and Development to A, give instructions and act as the authorised agent for the local government, and B, sign all documents for the local government. Mayor, may I make a suggestion to my recommendation there that we add defence of the appeal and add the number planning appeal 55/21 for clarity?
So you're wanting to increase your recommendation with the additional
please.
words at point 1?
Yes, please. Could the defence of the add the word planning before appeal and then add the numbers 55/21 after the word appeal?
Okay, 55-21. That's now appearing in the trapped minutes as to commence a defence of planning appeal 55-21.
Just for clarity, I think, Mayor.
Yep. Thank you. So, councillors, you have the GM's recommendation there. I seek a mover. Councillor McConnell. Any additional requests for information to this item? Any councillors online?
No. I'd just like to make my comments when my time is due. Thank you.
Thank you. Then seek a seconder.
Yeah, I'll second it, Mayor.
Seconded, Councillor McGuinness. Everyone was patiently holding their hands down, giving you guys time. Thank you for that. Any questions to councillors? Otherwise, I'll ask if you wish to speak, Councillor McConnell.
Yeah, just it's every resident's right to appeal these decisions. They're always hard because no matter what decision or what action we take as a council, it will
Councillor, I'm just going to clarify, it's every submitter's.
Submitters,
right to
sorry,
appeal.
yes.
Just, I'm sure that the manager planning would appreciate
Yeah.
that we.
Every
have
submitter
that
has a
clarity.
right to appeal these decisions. Every action and every decision we make as a councillor affects some resident or some person within the scenic rim, so it's always hard when we make these decisions to ensure that we do take into account all of the planning scheme and all of the impact it may have on the community. So I do appreciate that the resident has decided to appeal, and he has the right to do that, just as we have the right to take defence against the appeal. So I look forward to the outcome.
Councillor, anyone wishing to speak against the motion? Seeking leave to speak additionally to the motion?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I'd like to.
Councillor West?
Thank you, Mayor. Look, just to reiterate, I totally respect the right of appeal by those who have submitted to this application. And I know it's always difficult when there is change in one's area. It's always a little difficult at the time. I do just want to mention, though, that it has been many, many years since there's been a new childcare centre in the town of Beaudesert, which has impacted a number of people wanting to go back to work, both men and women, but especially at the hospital is the first one that comes to mind. Excuse me. Just given the fact that there are so many new houses up at the back of that particular area of Banksia Green, most of them are first homeowners. There's a lot of young families moving in up there who are wanting childcare, accessible childcare, for which it's not accessible at the moment. So anyway, that's just where I'll leave it. Thank you, Matt.
Thank you, Councillor West. Anyone else seeking leave to speak? I would just add the comment, like other matters, the appeal process is part of the holistic process around a range of issues that council administers and has responsibility for. There are times where we'll take matters of appeal, and there are times where submitters for other matters will take matters of appeal. There's no good, bad or ugly in that. That's just a reasonable, acceptable process, and we respect that process. We hope that our community also understand that that's a reasonable and proper process that is taken, in this case, by submitters on behalf of matters they're concerned about, and in other matters will be taken by council on matters that we believe are in the community interest overall to pursue fairly and properly. On this occasion, we'll go through a due process with the relevant authority, and we will, as Councillor McConnell alluded to, work through due process to a proper outcome. Wishing to close, Councillor McConnell? No. In which case, councillors, we have a motion before us in two parts. Those in favour, Councillor McConnell?
Yes.
Councillor West?
Yes.
Councillor Enright?
Yes.
Councillor Chalk?
Yes.
Councillor McGuinness?
Yes.
Mayor, yes. Here we move to item 10.3, a very topical item to have on the agenda today.
Thank you, Mayor. When Council adopted the Scenic Rim Planning Scheme in 2020, we made it clear that there would be a number of minor amendments that we would move straight to post its adoption. And today, officers are presenting a minor amendment to include the updated flood hazard overlay mapping for the Conundrum Township. We have online our Principal Specialist Strategic Planning, Heather Nelson, and I believe Heather is just going to speak to this report this morning.
Good morning, Heather.
Good morning everyone. So this minor amendment reflects the flood mapping of the recently adopted refined flood study for the Conundrum Township. This ensures that Council now has a complete suite of flood studies that incorporate a climate change factor for all the major catchments in the region. So the flood overlay is being changed in this amendment for the Conundrum Township area, as the recent refined flood study was prepared to provide a more accurate indication of the flood risk over the land, because updated ground levels from recent development weren't providing accurate levels. The proposed commencement date is the 16th of April 2021. Council needs to publish public notices in the local newspapers and in the Queensland Government Gazette to advise of the amendment. And all property owners affected by the changed flood mapping will also be provided with a letter and a fact sheet outlining the details of the amendment after it has effect.
Thank you. Councillors, do you have any points for clarification you'd like to raise at this time? Questions?
Duncan here, Mayor.
Yes.
If I could just ask Heather or the manager, when does a minor amendment become a major amendment? Is there a level? Is it? Is there a line there that we cross?
So, are you able to?
Yep, I'll answer the question. So a minor amendment is usually something that doesn't have much use going through a public consultation process, and that includes flood hazard mapping. We follow the guidelines of the Minister's Guidelines and Rules for making planning scheme amendments, and these types of amendments are defined and what kind of changes you can make that fit into those amendment types. And because this is a flood study that is based on best practice guidelines to adopt climate change and is prepared by RPEQ, so that is a registered professional engineer of Queensland, we're allowed to do this under the Minister's Guidelines and Rules as a minor amendment. And also, by putting a flood study up on public consultation, it's very difficult for people to really make meaningful comment, because there's really no scope to change the outcome of the flood study.
Thank you. Does that answer your question, Councillor?
Yes, it does, yeah.
Any other points for clarification, councillors? If not, it's certainly something that we've delved into the detail of a couple of times, and it's a wonderful art and combination of art and science that this entails. And I'm sure the outcomes will be appreciated by the affected property owners to have this additional clarification. Can I ask, GM, that you now introduce the recommendation?
Certainly, Mayor. The recommendation is that Council adopt the proposed minor amendment to the Scenic Rim Planning Scheme 2020, described as Amendment Number 1, for commencement on 16 April 2021, in accordance with Section 18 of the Planning Act 2016 and Chapter 2, Part 2 of the Minister's Guidelines and Rules.
I seek a mover.
Happy to move, ma'am.
Thank you, Councillor West. Everyone held their hands quietly for you. Any additional information? Not seek a seconder. Councillor Chalk. Wish to speak further, Councillor West?
Thank you, Mayor. Really just to say that the residents who were affected initially, they were very delighted. I know we adopted some flood study in the last ordinary meeting, but the fact that this is a minor amendment and they will get their notification within the next month is really very positive.
Anyone wishing to speak against? Seeking leave to speak additionally? Not, we move to the motion, and those in favour, Councillor McCollum?
Yes.
Councillor West?
Yes.
Councillor Enright?
Yes.
Councillor Chalk?
Yes.
Councillor McGuinness?
Yes.
Mayor, yes. Thank you, councillors. We move to item 10.4. Back to you, GM.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mayor and Councillor. 10.4 is the adoption of an administrative amendment now to the Scenic Rim Planning Scheme 2020. And again, I'm going to hand over to Heather Nelson to walk you through the preparation of this administrative amendment.
Thank you, Deborah. So this administrative amendment is proposed in order to correct a variety of minor errors and inconsistencies that have been identified through the first year of the implementation of the new planning scheme. The amendments do not change land use policy matters in the scheme. They seek to correct explanatory matters, formatting, cross-references, spelling or grammatical errors, a factual matter, redundant or outdated terms, and inconsistent numbering. This particular package of administrative amendment has 193 changes in total. We're proposing that it has effect on the 16th of April, which is the same day as the minor amendment for flooding, so that we have a new version of the planning scheme coming in on the same day. And as with the minor amendment, Council needs to publish a public notice in the local newspapers and in the Queensland Government Gazette to notify the change in the planning scheme.
You. Again, councillors, any matters for clarification to this item? Councillor McConnell.
Want to be called a nitpicker. How did all these get through in the first instance? As much as I know, you've got novels out there that have been read by probably 200 people before being published, and there's still errors in those, but these seem to be, some not significant, but you would think routine.
It's a really good question. Yeah, I think the answer is probably, sorry, I'm going to say partly human error and partly just the scale of what it takes to bring a planning scheme together, and it's many, many, many years in the making. So sometimes you read and reread it, and you don't pick up those errors. Fresh eyes are very valuable.
Thank you.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's just the scale of the document. There were different authors at different times throughout the development of the scheme, and as you'll see, a lot of it is italicising words and shifting columns across and things like that. And we did want to implement the scheme quickly and not spend too much time formatting at the end. There was a priority there to get it in effect as quickly as possible when we had the Minister's approval to adopt at the end of 2019.
And Council, if I may just add a comment to clarify that, certainly I recall in the discussion when planning scheme was brought before Council that was a comment, an observation that was made, that there was recognition there may be some spell check, grammar check, italicising and so forth that wasn't finessed, but the concern was to get it in place so that we could move forward to the next phases, which we're now doing with both the prior item and this. So I think that just confirms that comment. Could I just ask supplementary to that, how many pages in total were in the scheme when it was put forward, roughly? Nearest 50?
So maybe 400, something like that.
Yeah, or more, to be honest. Yeah. I would have said 600. Yeah.
So a reasonable challenge. So thank you. Any further clarifications? If not, I introduce the recommendation. Please, Gian.
Thank you, Mayor. The recommendation is that Council resolve to adopt the proposed administrative amendment to the Scenic Rim Planning Scheme 2020, described as Amendment Number 2, for commencement on 16 April 2021 in accordance with Section 18 of the Planning Act 2016 and Chapter 2, Part 1 of the Minister's Guidelines and Rules.
I seek a mover. Councillor Enright. Any additional information requests, councillors? Councillors online? Councillors in the room?
No.
Thank you. Then I seek a seconder. Councillor McConnell. Are there any additional comments or questions for councillors? Otherwise, I'll hand to Councillor Enright. Speak.
Oh, thank you, Mayor. Look, I think this is just a process of going through and refining a document that was a huge task, as Heather outlined, several authors. It's about producing a better document, and I'm sure the outcome with these administrative amendments will make this document an improved document for that of the future of the Scenic Room.
Thank you. Anyone wishing to speak against? Anyone seeking leave to speak additionally? If not, we move forward and we'll put the motion. Councillor McCollum?
Yes.
Councillor West?
Yes.
Councillor Enright?
Yes.
Councillor Chalk?
Yes.
Councillor McGuinness?
Yes.
Mayor, yes. Thank you, councillors. Move to item 10.5 on page 126. Again, GM, we're in your hands.
Thank you, Mayor and Councillors. 10.5 is Urban Utilities Draft Water Net Serve Plan for 2020 public consultation and details of the council submission that has been lodged. And again, I'm going to ask Heather Nelson if she would like to comment on the preparation of our submission.
Thank you, Deborah. So Urban Utilities has proposed changes to the Water Net Serve Plan, and these changes were in public consultation until the 18th of March 2021. The proposed changes include new infrastructure charge rates for water and wastewater services in the Bromwellton State Development Area. And this is different to the current situation because currently a developer needs to enter into an infrastructure agreement with Urban Utilities to provide for the water and the wastewater services. The proposed charge rates are lower by approximately half the amount of the charges in the industry zones of other connection areas such as Beaudesert. So this is incentivising development in the Bromwellton SDA, and it's considered as positive as it will play an important role in facilitating development in the Bromwellton SDA. There's also the inclusion of connection area maps and a charges schedule that also enables a better understanding of infrastructure costs earlier and upfront in the project lifestyle and a greater degree of certainty for developers. So the Planning Department has lodged a formal submission within the timeframe on behalf of Council supporting these changes as they're a positive step towards encouraging future development in Bromwellton.
Thank you. Clarification, questions, councillors? Councillor McConnell?
Yeah, just a note in there that Urban Utilities are doing their own public consultation. Do we have any idea what that is incorporated within the public, or is that more to do with those who are going to be looking to build within Bromwellton?
I can answer that question. So Urban Utilities is required to follow the process for public consultation of their net serve plans under the South East Queensland Water Distribution and Retailing Act. So it's similar to a planning scheme amendment or a planning scheme. They need to consult widely, public notices. They need to advise shareholder councils within a sort of 20 business day time period. So these changes would have been notified through local papers, I believe, at a minimum, but perhaps not at the local level of Beaudesert, but certainly on their website.
Thank you.
Any further points of clarification, councillors?
It's just one for me now.
Yes, Councillor West.
Heather, I was just wondering, when would you expect, would the council expect to have a response from Urban Utilities to the submission? Is it kind of months away or?
Thank you, Councillor. I think our advice was that they'd want to get this in as quickly as possible. Their consultation period closed on the 18th of March, so I would expect it to have effect within the next 2 to 3 months.
Any further clarifications, additional information? If not, we ask the GM to introduce the recommendation.
Thank you, Mayor. The recommendation is that Council note the submission made in support of the Urban Utilities Draft Water Net Serve Plan 2020.
I seek a mover. Councillor Enright. Any additional information requests, councillors? Not, I seek a seconder. Councillor Chalk. Further questions or comments to the item before we Councillor Enright to speak? Motion, Councillor.
Thank you, Mayor. I think this is one significant step toward attracting industry to the Bromilton State Development Area. There have been many hurdles. This has been a significant one, and I think this is a great reason to support Urban Utilities Draft Water Network Plan. That does provide a great incentive for industry into the Bromilton State Development Area. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone wishing to speak against? Seeking leave to speak additionally? If not, I will speak additionally, and similarly, it's only a few years ago that council was partner with getting some funding transferred through to do some upgrade to infrastructure out to the Bromilton precinct to get water available out there, and that has not been able to be used to best effect without having this agreement in place and having this document in place to help, as Councillor Enright said, the opportunity for attracting businesses there. It's good to see that Urban Utilities have recognised the commercial opportunity of attracting and incentivising there. Appreciate their leadership and support there for council's effort and state development's efforts to bring further value-adding opportunities into the precinct as it goes through its next stage of development. And this is a wonderful step forward to have removed another significant hurdle to what is a magnificent opportunity. Councillor, you wish to close? No, thanks. We put it to the vote. Councillor McConnell?
Yes.
Councillor West?
Yes.
Councillor Enright?
Yes.
Councillor Chalk?
Yes.
Councillor McGuinness?
Yes.
And Mayor, councillors, that brings us to the end of the customer regional prosperity items. We're about to move into item 10.6 with asset and environmental sustainability, dealing with the response to the environmental impact statement. I suspect this may require some conversation, and I just make the meeting aware that this morning we have made the decision to take our local disaster management group to stand up, and Councillor McConnell as deputy and myself as chair have a meeting an initial meeting with the disaster management group to review the status. I've just, as we've been meeting, I've seen the latest update. There are increasing numbers of road closures and continuing river rises at various locations, and I'm going to propose that we suspend or adjourn the meeting for a period of time. Probably for those listening in, I apologise that this is the nature of the day we are in, but this is an important part of our duties to go and deal with the emergency services. I'd alert you that we're seeing an increasing number of road corridors becoming compromised with water over road or bridges now closed, and also with road surface becoming increasingly damaged. So caution is required for anyone moving around. But I'll close the meeting or adjourn the meeting, and we will aim to be back as close as possible to 11, but I'm going to say give us till 11:10, and we'll try and make everyone stay very focused in their comments. For council officers and councillors who are dialing in, remember your early instructions about the challenges of dialing out, and perhaps just leave your devices on mute through this time so that we do not lose the continuity of your connections. Thank you. ready to rock back on. Welcome back, councillors and general managers and executive and officers, and to the gallery via digital connection. Thank you for your understanding of that interlude. Our local disaster management group have had their preliminary discussion around matters, and obviously we do have a number of road closures. We are seeing continued river rises affecting some of our bridges and road corridors, and we're also now getting reports of significant degeneration of some of the road corridors with potholes that you won't see through water. More concerningly, we're getting reports of people ignoring road close signs and driving into floodwater and needing someone to rescue them. That's not helpful. So I'll reiterate my mantra for today, which is, of course, if it's flooded, forget it. Second, unless it's urgent, defer it, because this won't be a long event. And thirdly, home is the safest place to be today. With that, councillors, let's press on now with item 10.6, which is the response to the draft environmental impact statement for Inland Rail, page 130 in the agenda. GM Asset Environment Sustainability, would you like to lead us into this, please?
Thank you, Mayor, councillors, executive, staff, and those listening online. Yes, as the title generally speaks for itself, this is the report outlines the council has submitted a submission to the draft environmental impact statement for the Inland Rail Kelvin to Kaggaroo project. As the submission was due on the 8th of March, we have already submitted that to the Coordinator General, and to assist with any detailed questions and to probably make additional specific comments, I've got Richard Hancock, who was pivotal in putting this together. So over to you, Richard.
Thanks, Chris. Can you hear me okay?
We certainly can.
Excellent. So as Chris said, the draft environmental impact statement for the Kelvin to Kaggaroo Inland Rail project was issued by the Coordinator General on the 21st of December for public notification, and that closed on the 8th of March. So a number of council officers and external consultants reviewed the draft EIS to identify the likely impacts of the Inland Rail and to understand the mitigation options included in the draft EIS. Out of that, council identified 4 particular areas that were a concern, which have been discussed before. So that's level crossings, noise mitigation, construction traffic, and flooding. But the EIS, council's EIS response also included commentary on other aspects of the EIS. It's important to note, though, that the EIS, our response to the EIS has to be a reference to the terms of reference for the EIS, which were agreed or issued by the Coordinator General in 2017.
Thank you. It's a very comprehensive document. Councillors are there. We've all had access to this, and a number of us have had discussions both in community and with officers through the preparation of this to understand and bring forward some of those issues. But are there particular questions for clarification this morning? Councillor McColl?
No, I think I'm all good. It's the summary just about sums everything up in the document, so it's pretty concise. Thank you.
Other councillors? Councillor Enright?
Thank you, Mayor. I'd agree with Councillor McConnell. It's a very extensive document and great effort to the staff who contributed to it, Richard particularly. My question is, do we have an understanding of the process from here?
Yes, so the The Coordinator General's office have told me they received over 850 submissions. Remembering that the Calvin to Kaggaroo project travels through the Scenic Rim region and the Ipswich region. Those submissions are being reviewed by the Coordinator General's office to collate them into so that there's a number of where there are a number of submissions on the same section of the terms of reference, and then that collated list of issues and the original submissions will be sent to ARTC for their review and response back to the Coordinator General, who will then look at whether they need more information, either from ARTC or from the public. And occasionally they'll go out to another public consultation period to gather more information if the Coordinator General deems it necessary. And then at some point after that process has run its course, the Coordinator General will issue a final report, which is her direction on what's required in the way of conditions for this project to proceed. That's, I would imagine, months away.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Further question?
Yes, further question. Is there any opportunity to provide any further information feedback at this stage, or we just wait for the assessment to be done?
So the formal public consultation period finished on the 8th of March, and the definition of a properly made submission is one that was submitted before the closing date. However, up until the Coordinator General issues her final report, we can send information in. It wouldn't be considered necessarily, it may not be considered a properly made submission, but that doesn't mean that the Coordinator General will ignore it. So I think the answer is yes, but it'll be up to the Coordinator General to decide whether that submission is useful or will be responded to.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
Thank you. Any other queries or clarifications from the councillors online? Councillor McGuinness.
Duncan here. Mayor, Richard, I note when it went to the public around the place, it wouldn't be considered unless they had reference numbers, unless you reference the numbers. I noticed we didn't do that. That you detailed what section you were looking at and whatever. Is that an issue, do you think, or was there a reason why we didn't do it?
It is adequate. We've referenced the section that we're talking about. We did ask for reference numbers to be attached to each point, but the Coordinator General chose to issue this on the 21st of December with a 12-week, I think, notification period. That's a difficult time of year to get access to a lot of people, so really we had about 6 weeks to prepare this, and some of that is lost in reviewing, and so there were time frame issues with getting everything ready. It would have been nice to have put reference numbers against every line, every dot point, but we ran out of time.
Yeah, I know Ipswich only put theirs in last week, end of last week, I think it was. So I'm pretty sure it's just well after the date at any rate. So so maybe we could have had a bit more time, but you don't want to push the.
Yeah, that's right. Ipswich didn't use that time in reviewing their document. Their document was prepared by Monday morning, ready to submit the day, and then it took a while to go through review.
Okay. Yeah, certainly. I might just add, Mayor, that Canberra last week, Logan and Lockyer are not fans of this at all, and I can understand why, going through the smaller towns in Lockyer especially, where there's no real benefit to the council, but there's I haven't seen theirs. I don't know, Richard, whether you've seen their submission at all.
So Logan, I think, did make a submission to the Calvin to Kaggaroo EIS, which I haven't seen. The submissions are not public submissions. They're not published unless the submitter chooses to submit to publish them. Obviously, councils is public in that it's in the meeting minutes. So Logan did make a submission on the Calvin to Kaggaroo, and they will obviously make a submission on, I would expect, on the Kaggaroo to Acacia Ridge and Bromelton project, if that becomes a coordinated project subject to an EIS process, as will Scenic Rim Regional Council. For Lockyer,
Lockyer's not in this one, of course. Yeah,
Lockyer's not in the Calvin to Kaggaroo project. That's right. It's in the Hellerton to Calvert project, and the EIS for that is due to be issued in a week or two.
Yeah, let's hope some notice is taken of it. That's Mayor. I hope this whole thing isn't a charade.
Councillor, I'm going to invite you to share those comments perhaps when we have a motion on the table. I think that's a very appropriate place for those.
Okay.
Comments? I think
no more questions.
Thank you. I think we share some of the same sentiment, but let's put it in the right place. Any other clarifications to this report? Pardon me. If not, I would ask that we introduce the recommendation.
Thank you, Mayor. The recommendation for this item is that Council retrospectively endorse the submission made to the Coordinator General in response to the draft environmental impact statement for the Inland Rail to Kaggaroo project.
I seek a mover. Councillor Enright. Any additional information required, councillors? No, I seek a seconder. Councillor Chalk?
Yeah.
Councillor Chalk beat you. He waited and waited patiently. That mute button's elusive. Any other questions to other councillors or observations before we ask? Well, Councillor Enright, you wish to speak?
Thank you, Mayor. I think this is an appropriate way. This is a part of the process to go through. It's a nation building project, a significant project that has a huge benefit for the nation. However, there are some considerable concerns of that impact on our residents, on our region, and the opportunity to provide that impact through this process has been welcomed, and we look forward to an appropriate response in the due process.
Thank you, Councillor. Anyone wishing to speak against? Anyone else seeking leave to speak additionally? Councillor McGuinness, this might be an opportunity for you to introduce some of those comments.
Yes, Mayor, I will repeat what I said before. I think it's, I just hope this is to take into account. Like one stage a bit critical, maybe we could have gone in a little bit harder on things, but I don't think the outcome probably would have changed too much. It is a benefit for the council with Bromelton, there's no doubt about that, but the impact on a lot of residents is significant, and we want that addressed. I believe it's important that we do have that addressed. I think it's, I worry that the whole thing is a bit of a charade, and that even though it's public and accountable, it's they can easily say no to our requests, and they just won't change where they are. So, but if we don't put something there, we've had our opportunity, we've done that, and I think it's, let's hope there is notice taken of it.
Thank you, Councillor. Any additional requests to speak? If not, I will add a comment before I hand back to Councillor Enright. I share many of those observations, Councillor. I am in support of the motion, and I believe it's important that we put this forward. Whilst there are issues that are specific for council's concerns, certainly I commend Richard and the others who've worked diligently on this and also that we've picked up many of the issues that I believe have been submitted separately from affected community members. Very supportive of the strategic foresight to think about nation building projects that transform the effectiveness of logistics to support commerce in Australia. However, in doing so, we need to ensure that the next 100 years of lifestyle and environment and social impacts aren't a detriment to our region, and that's why this process allows us to put forward our voice. We all share a concern because of perhaps some bad history around certain events, and that sometimes what we put forward in these things isn't properly considered. From other dialogues, I have to have confidence in the Coordinator General. I've seen very good diligence in the office in their discharge of their responsibilities, and have to put faith in the process the same as others put faith in our processes. And again, this is a project that will have impacts for more than 100 years. We need to, it's a passionate call once again in our response to make sure that ARTC in doing this project are getting the right solutions to be sustainable over that time frame, rather than leaving our region and others around us with the negative legacy of this development. Councillor Enright, you wish to close? Thank you. We put it to the vote. Councillor McConnell?
Yes.
Councillor West?
Yes.
Councillor Enright?
Yes.
Councillor Chalk?
Yes.
Councillor McGuinness?
Yes.
Mayor, yes. Thank you. We now move, and that's, can I just in closing that reiterate, whilst for those who are listening to this, they might go, well, it's, you know, it looks good. It's a 26, I think a 26 volume set that when you see the environmental impact study, I think it's, when it's cover to cover, it's not quite a metre thick of A4 document, if I recall, Richard, and scanning through that and crystallising down to these critical issues is an incredible, diligent and high performing effort, and our great appreciation for your support with this process.
Thank you.
Councillors, we move to item 10.7 at page 133 in our agenda, and we turn to the GM Council Sustainability.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and good morning, councillors, staff, and the public listeners out there. 10.7 is titled the Community Monthly Financial Report for February, and intends to provide how council is financially positioned as at 28th of February. End of February represents 2/3 of the financial year elapsing, and as the executive summary of the report attachment, which is page 184 of the attachment under separate covered document, indicates that council's position as of end of February is a net operating surplus of 4.387 million. And what that indicates, Mr. Mayor, is obviously operationally there's been a number of forecasted expenditure that haven't met the mark. We're working with the teams to evaluate those under expenditures to see what the likelihood is as at 30th of June, whether or not that underspend is going to continue, which will then obviously play a part in council's deliberation for the 21-22 budget. High-level analysis of the report as of 28th February. From a balance sheet perspective, it does indicate that council's $10.9 million ahead of schedule, where our expected cash levels are going to be. And obviously this is on the back of the operating expenditure and capital expenditure being 4.3 and $4.8 million behind budget levels, and a slightly a slight increase in capital revenues of 1.9 million. And Mr. Mayor, the only other couple of points, as I generally do, make an indication around our investments, which is on page 191 or 192 in the separate attachment reports. Whilst we've had an increase in cash levels, we're slowly. The month of February has seen another 0.01% drop in the weighted average for the interest rate applicable. So we're not realising any major benefits out of that, given the fact that when we adopted the budget, we were expecting around 1.6% weighted average for our investments to attract some revenue to them. On that page as well, it's interesting to point, for the month of February, we had a total of $3.2 million expended for business supplies and services for the month of February. And of that 1.2 million was expended on Scenic rim-based businesses, representing 37.5% of that total expenditure for the month of February. Also, February saw the obviously the bulk of the collection for the January rates levy, and it's again there, Mr. Mayor, as the page indicates on page 192, the debtors outstanding in particular relating to rates, general rates and services, compared to the same position, same period last year. There's a slight improvement in this year in terms of the total outstanding. You can see what's indicated there is that the total outstanding as of 28th of February 2021 represents about 7.074 million. Now, if you look on the corresponding column as of 28th of February 2020, while it indicates 6.324 million there, if you add the prepayments that were netted off the actual total, that figure is actually 7.136 million. So, yeah, there's been a slight reduction in the what's been outstanding, which is sort of positive for us as we continue to monitor cash flow impacts associated with COVID and uncertainties around the financial sort of markets. So, outside of that, Mr. Mayor, I'll open the floor to the councillors to seek any further clarity to matters contained in the report and the attachment.
Councillors, any points of clarification? Councillor McConnell, start with you.
Yeah, to the GM, I noticed we've still got a large staff vacancy. Can we get an update on that at the moment, where we're at? I think it's the
probably
GM people and strategy.
I'll have to, yeah. Caroline, are you able to provide update on that? I do know part of that salaries also includes associated training costs. So,
sorry, Oliver, can you repeat that, please?
Part of that underspend in there includes some of the training budget as well. So it's not all purely vacancies.
Yeah, thank you for your question, Councillor McConnell. As indicated by Oliver, well, firstly, I'll address the question about the vacancy. Our vacancy rate is sitting at what I would expect it to sit at. It's benchmarked, slightly above about 10%. It's benchmark, from a local government benchmark, that's not an unhealthy vacancy rate. It's worth pointing out that that's aligned with a reasonably healthy turnover rate. So we're not seeing roles that are vacant. 10% of our roles that are consistently vacant, we're seeing turnover throughout the organisation. And that can be a really positive thing in terms of bringing new ideas and new capabilities and skills to the organisation. Where we do have vacancies for a longer period of time, we've had a very strong focus on our strategic recruitment so that we are attracting the right people to the organisation. We would rather
have that role sit vacant for a period of time than to appoint the wrong person to a role that's critical in the organisation. The other comment I will make about the budgeted underspend is that we are yet to process a small CPI increment for award-based staff, which is likely to happen towards the end of this financial year, perhaps carried over into the early into the new financial year, and a number of a small amount of the budget, as Oliver pointed out, is attributable to learning and development, and we anticipate that we will spend some of that over the coming quarter.
Thank you.
Councillor Enright, yes, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Question to Oliver, if I may. I note in the executive summary, page 185, a comment regarding the capital revenue, that infrastructure charges now exceeded annual expectations by $425,000. I wonder if it's possible to get a bit more of a breakdown on these items.
Thank you, Councillor Enright. Yeah, in particular, the infrastructure charges on their own, Council did adopt a budget of new infrastructure charges for the year, amounting to about 2.26 million for the full year. The year-to-date budget was to sit around 868. The actuals collected for that period include 2.685 million, so that's why that's representing the 1.8 ahead of budget expectations, and obviously some of that relates to where Council had the previous issue, outstanding rates. Outstanding infrastructure charges that remained outstanding for a substantial period of time, and certainly under Deborah's and Mark's team under the Customer and Regional Prosperity, they've undertaken that project to certainly follow through and chase up all those outstanding and follow those up and collect them and as they've been realised. The other main variances in regards to that particular area, we're about $820,000 ahead of budget expectations as part of our Building Our Regions funding, and there's also some minor payments under the LERP funding for the Vonda Youngman Community Centre that we've been paid that wasn't originally budgeted for, and obviously as part of when Council executes the funding agreement, generally there's a 30% upfront payment, and we at that point in time, as of the December budget review, the LERP funding wasn't actually factored into the budget documentations, and that will be reflected in the March budget review.
Thank you for that clarification. May I have a second question? In the statement of financial position, there's a listing of other current liabilities, 1.495 million. Is this purely the state fire levy due to the timing of the remittance, or are there other contributors to this additional liability?
Thank you again, Councillor Enright. Yes, that's 100% associated with the state fire levy, with the January 2021 second half rates levy being issued and as subsequent collection. It sits in the other current liabilities, waiting to be transferred and remitted back to the Queensland Government.
Thank you for that clarification.
Thank you, Councillor. Other points for clarification, councillors online or Councillor Chalk? I just...
Yes, I've got a question for Oliver, Virginia, yes?
Yes, please.
Oliver, look, I just wondered, during COVID we had a hire of extra vehicles, especially for the outside staff because of social distancing. Is all of that gone back to normal again now, or do we still have vehicles on hire for those, especially for outdoor staff?
I'll probably get General Manager Asset Environment Sustainability, but from my understanding, Councillor West, a lot of those vehicles have been returned back to their providers, and obviously with some of the relaxations around the Queensland Chief Health Officer's advice around some of the protocols and restrictions, that's allowed additional protocols and factors to be incorporated into our work practices to mitigate some of those things.
Thank you.
I can add to that too that the majority of the vehicles have been sent back. There might be one or two for an operational reason that are still being hired, but that would be the case whether there was a COVID impacts or not. So generally speaking, all of the vehicles as a result of COVID have been returned.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you. Any other points of clarification, councillors? I would just raise one on page 190 of 192 in the attachments under separate cover. We get a lot of comment around our capital expenditure, and I recognise we have really had some massive opportunities to access funding over recent years, which has allowed us to bring forward programs that would not have been touched for another 10 years over the last few years if we hadn't had that access. However, when I look, I would ask for consideration and a clarification. Would it be beneficial for us to have perhaps a separate table brought forward at another time to understand what happened in our budget? We get funding that runs over multiple years, I believe, and the way our budget process works, that actually shows in the year that we're in, even if it is carried forward into another year as part of the 2-year program. And that creates confusion in community where I'm concerned that might lead to confused commentary. So would it be possible, as a clarification, to get a breakdown of what were the steps that took us from our original 22 million to where we are today, and how that breakdown has occurred, and what that then will let us understand what our true progress against plans is versus what might otherwise come out with people's gap in understanding. Is that a possible clarification?
Yeah, that's certainly doable, Mr. Mayor, and you can see from that column there, yeah, when we originally adopted the budget July 12 last year, we adopted that with a $22 million budget for total capital works for that, purely for that financial year. And as the years evolve, as the year has evolved, and we've taken into account the carry forwards from 1920 and any new funding, that's ballooned from 22 million to 53 million. But we can certainly provide some further insight into that in what splits the difference of those two, and we'll incorporate that the next monthly report. But certainly one thing to keep an eye on is when council, when we close the financial year, and then when we do discuss the carry forwards to go into the budget, and then that's a separate matter that's provided to the public to give them an understanding of how the financial year has panned out, and what we were able to deliver, and what we're needing to roll forward into the new year.
Thank you, and perhaps we can discuss the format of that to add that clarity later. But thank you, councillors. If there are no other items, I'll ask someone, the GM, to introduce the recommendation.
Yep.
Thank
Mayor, could I just
sorry, Councillor McGuinness, yeah.
Quickly?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I don't know whether it's Oliver or Caroline or Chris, one of them. And I don't expect I'd like a report to come forward where we sit on OH&S in relation to other councils. I'm not suggesting that we compromise OHS in any way whatsoever, but we and compromise people's lives and injuries. But I see other councils, and I talk to other councils at times, the amount that they do, it seems significantly less than what we're doing. If we could have a report and just where we do sit with OH&S.
Councillor, I understand the request for a report. That's not actually related to the finance report.
I think it is. Yeah.
Oh, well, which part of the? I think I hear that as a request to understand what the status of our OH&S, are you talking about what do we spend on OH&S? Just because
I am, and that I take it it's wrapped up in employees' expenses in some form or other. There's certainly no separate line item there, and I'd like whether we have there or a workshop. I just want to have an understanding with
Councillor, can I suggest that we get clarity around what you want in the scope of the report outside of the meeting? Because I think there are more aspects in what I heard in your comment and what might be possible to, and certainly not what we'd want to have at a strategic level in a report, but understanding how that integrates may be challenging, because I would expect it's an integral part of a supervisory role, so it depends on the level you want it to go to. I'd suggest that needs a separate conversation to clarify before that report comes forward.
Councillor McGuinness, I'm more than happy to meet with you offline to discuss that.
Yep. Okay. Thanks, Caroline. Yeah.
Thank you. We move to your recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The recommendation for item 10.7 is that Council endorse the monthly financial report for February 2021.
Seek a mover.
Yeah, I'll move it.
Thank you, Councillor McGuinness. Any additional requests for information to this matter? Not. We have a seconder in Councillor Chalk. Wish to speak further, Councillor McGuinness?
I'm right, thanks.
Anyone wishing to speak against or wishing to speak additionally? If not, we shall put the motion. Councillor McConnell?
Yes.
Councillor West?
Yes.
Councillor Enright?
Yes.
Councillor Chalk?
Yes.
Councillor McGuinness?
Yes.
Mayor, yes. Thank you, councillors. Now that I now seek a motion to move into closed session to deal with one confidential item. Moved Councillor McConnell.
Second, Mayor.
Seconded Councillor West. Those in favour, Councillor McConnell?
Yes.
Councillor West?
Yes.
Councillor Enright?
Yes.
Councillor Chalk?
Yes.
Councillor McGuinness?
Yes.
And Mayor, yes. To the gallery, I would like to say that we'll be back before 12 to bring this to a close. However, if we are not back before 12, it may be 12:15 then that we're back, because well, it's just for those. There is a we'll explain when we bring the item back out, but we have one item that has satisfies the requirements to be treated as confidential, that under the relevant legislation that we will now be dealing with. So we'll bid you a temporary good day, and to the gallery, and we'll pause the broadcast there. back on open broadcast. Apologies, gallery, we've had some busy time in there. Thank you for your patience. Thought it appropriate just to clarify the item that we went into confidential to discuss relates to an agreement from the state government that council's being asked to sign, and as such it commands a confidentiality under the relevant legislation, and for that reason we went into close to discuss it. However, we do now have a recommendation that I'd ask the GM to introduce for us to resolve this matter. You got the GM back? We're still on mute. In the absence
I'm sorry, I'm here. Sorry, Mayor, I just couldn't get the mute to come on. I would like to, before putting the recommendation before council today, I would like to add some words after the word deed, and I'd like to add a bracket, March 2021 version, just for clarity. Thank you.
Thank you.
So the recommendation before council today is that 1, council agree to enter into the delivery partner guarantee deed March 2021 version with the Queensland Government concerning the potential for the region to be a host venue for certain competitions at the Brisbane 2032 Olympic Games proposed to be held in Brisbane, Southeast Queensland. 2, that council delegate authority to the Chief Executive Officer to negotiate the final version of the delivery partner guarantee deed with the Queensland Government prior to signing. And 3, that council acknowledge that the delivery partner guarantee deed is required to be in place for Brisbane City to be able to present all of its required responses to the International Olympic Committee by the 7th of April 2021.
Thank you. Councillors, we've discussed this matter. I seek a mover. Councillor McConnell. Don't believe there are any other matters for clarification. Well, I will seek a seconder. Councillor Chalk. Any further comment required? Anyone else seeking to comment to the item? If not, we'll put the 3-part motion. Those in favour, Councillor McConnell?
Yes.
Councillor West?
Yes.
Councillor Enright?
Yes.
Councillor Chalk?
Yes.
Councillor McGuinness?
Yes.
And Mayor, yes. Thank you, councillors. Thank you, GMs, executive, CEO, and officers. Councillors, I will remind you that the documents, I just ask you to return those documents for confidentiality purposes. And so I would just now, the reason we did take some time whilst we were paused, we did get interrupted with some LGMG discussions. So I just again reiterate as we close off today's meeting that this afternoon, I'm just using this opportunity, which doesn't really form part of the minutes of the meeting for minute-taking purposes. So effectively the meeting is closed, but if we just continue the broadcast for a moment. This is a very different flood event to what the last one was, and every one of them is different. What we have seen in the last 4 to 6 hours is significant rises in many of our waterways, and where we did have 3 and 4 metre buffers at dawn, those are significantly reduced. We are still not at a position where we are at high risk of inundation of households, dwelling places. However, as the rainfall has continued heavy through the last few hours, it is supposed to, according to the forecast, get increasingly heavy through the afternoon. That will create a heightened risk because the rivers are now all full, and so any further water will cause both rapid increases and when you're at the top of the bank, as we all know, the next metre up spreads a lot further. So the Local Disaster Management Group will be meeting again this afternoon, 3 o'clock, to review our readiness through the night. Councillors, I would just commend you that our staff have been working diligently. This morning I witnessed a skeleton crew quietly clearing landslips on Tambourine Mountain Road at 4 o'clock in the morning, and then successfully clearing the block drain at Curtis Falls. Some delicate art, reaching underwater with a backhoe, I believe, to feel for a barbecue and some garden furniture and a log that were blocking a drain, so that it could be cleared. So quite skillful operators, I would say. But those challenges will still keep coming our way. Again, as I sign off, I'd remind people, if it's flooded, forget it. Unless it's urgent, defer it. And home is a great place to be today. Good afternoon.